It is a curious thing that in an age of science and reason, we have become blind to the most ancient of realities. We speak often of psychology, of trauma, of the complexities of human nature, yet we scarcely consider that beyond the mind and flesh there exists a war for the soul. It is not a war waged with swords or bullets, nor one confined to distant battlefields. It is fought in the secret places of the heart, in the silent whispers that bend a man's will, in the slow and steady descent of a soul into darkness. But how does one recognize the signs of such an unseen foe? If a man were to be ensnared by a force beyond himself, how would we know? The answer is both simple and unsettling. We know them by their fruits. The first mark of a soul in bondage is an unnatural resistance to truth. It is not mere ignorance, for ignorance may be corrected, nor is it simple doubt, for doubt may be relieved. No, this is a hostility toward truth itself. Such a person will shrink from wisdom as one recoils from flame, preferring instead the cold comfort of falsehoods that coddle their ego. They do not seek truth to be free, they flee from it to remain in chains. The second mark is an aversion to what is good. You will see it when love is met with hatred, when kindness is dismissed as weakness, when joy is mocked, and when purity is scorned. The darkness within them is irritated by light, not because they do not see it, but because they loathe it. The third mark is deception, for falsehood is the native tongue of darkness. They will weave webs of lies, not always to harm others, but often to sustain the illusions they have embraced. Their words may be coated in charm, their reasoning may seem sound, but their foundation is built on shifting sand. And lastly, there is the mark of destruction. The enemy of light has but one purposta steel, to kill and to destroy. A soul in bondage will, whether consciously or not, leave a trail of brokenness behind them. They will destroy relationships, break promises, and harm themselves and others, all the while believing they are in control. But let me speak plainly, there is always a way back. No darkness is so deep that light cannot pierce it. No chain is so strong that truth cannot break it. The first step out of bondage is the recognition that one is bound. And the second? To turn toward that which the darkness fears most, love, truth, and grace. The greatest deception ever woven by the forces of darkness is their ability to remain unseen. They do not march openly as soldiers on a battlefield, nor do they declare their intentions in the clear light of day. Instead, they work in silence, slipping unnoticed into the corners of human thought, bending desires, whispering distortions, and manipulating the world without ever announcing their presence. The modern mind, trained in logic and reason, often dismisses such notions as superstition. It is precisely this dismissal that grants evil its most powerful weaponity. A war unacknowledged is a war already lost. The battlefield of this unseen war is not a distant land, nor is it confined to ancient tales and mythologies. It rages within the human soul, influencing emotions, twisting perceptions, and shaping decisions in ways that often go unrecognized. Those under its influence rarely perceive themselves as captives. Rather, they see themselves as free thinkers, independent spirits, or even enlightened rebels against outdated moral structures. Yet, true freedom lies in the ability to choose rightly, and the greatest loss of freedom occurs when one believes they are making independent choices while, in reality, Their desires and thoughts have been subtly directed by external force. The enemy in this war is not a beast with horns and a pitchfork, nor is it merely the idea of bad choices or moral failings. It is an intelligence, ancient and malevolent, possessing a singular Goletha distortion of truth. For truth, when fully embraced, leads to freedom, and freedom threatens the power of darkness. Thus, deception becomes the primary weapon of the unseen war. It does not always come in obvious falsehoods more often. It is a slight bending of reality, a twisting of perception that leads a person further from what is good without them ever realizing they have drifted. Consider how a mind can be conditioned over time. At first, there is an awareness of right and wrong, of light and dark. But the enemy does not strike all at once. Instead, it offers small compromises, little justifications that, when repeated, form a new way of thinking. The unacceptable becomes tolerable, the tolerable becomes normal, and soon, what was once unthinkable is embraced without a second thought. This slow erosion of truth is one of the most effective strategies of the unseen war. One of the most insidious tactics of darkness is its ability to work within the ordinary. It does not always manifest in great and terrible events sometimes. It works through small discouragements, quiet temptations, or subtle resentments. A person does not wake up one day and suddenly find themselves fully lost. Rather, they are led step by step, inch by inch, until they look back and no longer recognize the person they once were. Evil rarely demands a full surrender at once. It is content with small victories, knowing that each concession makes the next one easier. The modern world often dismisses the idea of unseen spiritual conflict, preferring instead to attribute human behavior solely to psychological and social influences. While these factors certainly play a role, they do not tell the whole story. For there are moments when the darkness within a person defies rational explanation, when an irrational hatred burns against what is good, when truth is met with an almost instinctive hostility, when a person clings to their own destruction as if it were salvation. In these moments, one must ask, what force is truly at work here? The unseen war is not fought with swords or weapons, nor is it won by human strength alone. It is a battle for perception, for belief, for the mind itself. And those who do not acknowledge its reality are often its first victims. A soldier who does not believe in war will never prepare for battle, and a man who does not recognize an enemy will never defend himself. The greatest advantage darkness has is not its power, but its ability to convince people that it does not exist. One of the clearest signs that someone is under the influence of darkness is their unnatural resistance to truth. This resistance is not the simple reluctance of an ignorant man who has not yet encountered wisdom, nor the hesitation of a doubter who wrestles with uncertainty. It is something far more deliberate and active and persistent hostility toward truth itself. When truth is spoken, it is met not with curiosity or consideration, but with anger, scorn, or dismissal. The person resists not because they have examined and rejected the truth on rational grounds, but because something within them cannot bear to acknowledge it. They shrink from wisdom as one recoils from a blinding light, preferring the familiar shadows where their illusions remain undisturbed. This resistance manifests in various ways. Sometimes it takes the form of arrogance and unshakable belief that they already possess all the knowledge they need, and that any challenge to their understanding is an insult. At other times, it appears as cynicism, a refusal to believe in anything noble, good, or transcendent, as if hope and virtue are mere delusions. In its most extreme form, it becomes outright hatred for what is true. They do not merely reject truth, they despise it. They ridicule those who uphold it, mock those who seek it, and attempt to silence those who proclaim it. A second mark of spiritual corruption is an aversion to goodness. It is not simply that the person struggles with morality. After all, every human being fights against weaknesses and temptations. Rather, it is that they have come to resent goodness itself. They see purity as something naive, kindness as something foolish, and virtue as something oppressive. When they witness genuine goodness in others, their first instinct is not admiration, but suspicion or ridicule. A kind person is labeled weak, a selfless act is assumed to have hidden motives, and those who pursue righteousness are dismissed as hypocrites or fools. This aversion can often be observed in how a person reacts to joy and love. When someone is spiritually whole, they are drawn to what is beautiful, uplifting, and life-giving. They find peace in love, delight in truth, and joy in the presence of goodness. But when darkness has taken root, these things become unbearable. A corrupt soul is uncomfortable in the presence of genuine love because it exposes the emptiness within them. They cannot rejoice with those who rejoice, nor can they tolerate those who are at peace. Instead, they attempt to tear down, corrupt, or discredit whatever is good, as if doing so will justify their own emptiness. A third sign is deception, not only the lies one tells others, but also the lies one tells oneself. Those in the grip of darkness do not merely deceive, they construct entire narratives to support their delusions. Their lies are not always grand or dramatic, but often take the form of subtle distortions of reality. They justify actions that are clearly wrong by twisting logic to fit their desires. They rewrite the past to cast themselves as the victim or the hero, refusing to acknowledge their own responsibility for their failures. Over time, these deceptions become so ingrained that they no longer recognize them as lies. The truth, when presented to them, is dismissed as offensive or irrelevant because it threatens the false world they have built. Deception also extends to the way they manipulate others. A spiritually corrupt person will often use half-truths, misleading statements, or outright fabrications to control those around them. They gaslight, distort, and twist words to serve their own purposes. They pretend to be righteous when it suits them, feigning concern for justice, morality, or compassion, while secretly working toward self-interest. They know how to wear the mask of virtue while undermining it at every turn. Perhaps the most telling mark of all is destruction. A person under spiritual corruption, whether knowingly or unknowingly, becomes an agent of disorder. Wherever they go, relationships break down, trust erodes, and division spreads. They are not merely troubled individuals making mistakes. They carry an aura of decay, pulling others into their chaos. Their presence drains rather than replenishes, and their words plant discord rather than understanding. Even when they claim to seek peace, their actions betray them stirring resentment, feeding conflict, and spreading despair. This destruction is not always external. Many who are under the grip of darkness turn their own self-hatred inward. They sabotage their own happiness, reject those who love them, and engage in self-destructive behaviors. They may pursue excess wealth and pleasure, power, or escapism, yet nothing satisfies them. No matter how much they indulge, they remain hollow, for their soul is feeding on the very things that poison it. All of these signs: resistance to truth, hatred of goodness, deception, and destruction point to a reality beyond mere human weakness. These are not simply personality flaws or psychological struggles. They are evidence of something deeper at work. Darkness does not manifest in grand and theatrical displays alone. More often, it works subtly, twisting the heart and mind until a person no longer recognizes what they have become. Evil does not take root in a person all at once. It does not crash through the door with chains and shackles, forcing submission by brute strength. Rather, it comes with a whisper, a suggestion, a small compromise that seems insignificant at first. It does not demand outright allegiance, but instead offers convenience, ease, or justification. It presents itself as an option, not an imposition. This is the nature of the unseen battle won of influence rather than force, of persuasion rather than possession. A person is not overtaken by darkness in a single moment, but rather through a series of choices, each one leading further down the path of corruption. These choices may seem harmless at first: slight bending of truth, an act of selfishness, a moment of pride that is left unchecked. But darkness does not require a person to commit great evil. All at once, it only needs them to step away from what is good, even if only by a fraction. Once that first step is taken, the next becomes easier, and the next even easier still. This process is gradual, almost imperceptible. A man does not wake up one morning and suddenly decide to abandon all virtue. Instead, he makes small allowances, excuses minor faults, and dismisses quiet warnings. He silences his conscience when it whispers, choosing instead to listen to the voice that tells him, "This is no great matter," or "You deserve this," or "No one will know." Each time he yields, his will weakens, and his ability to resist diminishes. The will plays a crucial role in this descent. A man cannot be forced into darkness against his will, but his will can be influenced, bent, and eventually trained to desire what is harmful. Evil does not always present itself as something obviously vile. Often, it masquerades as something desirable, something that appears good on the surface but is twisted in its essence. It offers power, disguised as freedom, indulgence, disguised as fulfillment, vengeance, disguised as justice. The will, once drawn in by these false promises, begins to crave them, mistaking poison for nourishment. Once the will is compromised, deception takes deeper hold. A person in the grip of darkness does not always recognize their own state. The further they go, the more convinced they become that they are acting of their own accord. They may believe they are making choices freely, when in reality, their desires have been subtly shaped by the very forces they think they control. The more they give in, the more they justify their actions, and the harder it becomes to turn back. True bondage occurs not when a person is physically restrained, but when they willingly choose what is destructive while believing it to be their own desire. This is the ultimate strategy of Darknesta. Make a person embrace their own chains, to convince them that the things which enslave them are the things that set them free. It is not the outwardly tormented soul that is most lost, but the one who has come to love their own corruption, to see it as natural, even righteous. There is a profound danger in the illusion of control. Many who are under the influence of darkness believe themselves to be in command of their choices. They see themselves as the master of their own fate, unbound by moral constraints or external influences. Yet, the paradox is this: the more they claim to be free from all authority, the more enslaved they become. The one who declares, "I bow to no higher law," often finds themselves bound by chains they cannot see. Even in the face of repeated warnings, those who are far gone in their corruption resist correction. The deeper one falls, the harder it becomes to acknowledge the need for change. Pride plays a key role in this resistance. To admit error, to recognize that one has been deceived, requires humility, something that darkness strips away over time. The will, once so flexible and bending toward corruption, becomes rigid and unyielding when faced with the truth. But choice remains, even in the darkest moments. No matter how far one has gone, the will is never entirely beyond redemption. Yet, the longer one walks the path of deception, the less they desire to turn back. The tragedy of spiritual corruption is not that a person cannot be saved, but that they will not seek salvation. The chains are breakable, but only if one recognizes they are bound. Darkness does not conquer by force, it conquers by distortion. It does not need to break the body or silence the tongue. It only needs to corrupt perception. The greatest victories of evil are not found in open violence, but in quiet deception, in the slow twisting of reality until a man no longer recognizes truth when he sees it. The battlefield is not in the world around us, but within the mind, where thoughts are shaped, desires are directed, and convictions are formed. Perception is the lens through which a person understands the world. It dictates what they believe to be true, what they accept as good, and what they reject as false. If this lens is distorted, then the mind itself becomes compromised. The individual begins to see illusions where truth should be, to embrace falsehoods while rejecting reality. What was once seen as noble appears foolish, what was once clear becomes clouded, and what was once evil appears justified. One of the most dangerous aspects of this war on perception is that it does not feel like a battle. The mind, once deceived, does not recognize its own deception. It does not question the new reality it has embraced, because it believes it has arrived at it through reason or experience. This is why those under the influence of darkness often reject correction. They are convinced that they see things clearly, while those who challenge them are blind. This distortion of perception begins subtly. It does not arrive in the form of blatant lies, but rather through small shifts in perspective. A harmless indulgence is seen as a deserved reward. A minor dishonesty is reframed as necessary pragmatism. A selfish act is justified as self-care. Little by little, the foundation of truth is eroded, replaced with rationalizations that make compromise easier. Over time, these distortions reshape a person's understanding of morality. What was once recognized as wrong is now excused, then defended, and eventually embraced. The boundaries between good and evil blur until they are no longer distinguishable. The person begins to believe that morality is subjective, that truth is flexible, and that personal preference is the only standard worth following. Perhaps the most devastating effect of this war on perception is the reversal of values. Darkness does not merely convince a person to tolerate evil, it convinces them to love it. They begin to take pride in their rebellion, to celebrate what was once shameful, to mock what was once sacred. They see virtue as weakness and vice as strength. They embrace corruption as enlightenment and reject wisdom as oppression. This war extends beyond the individual. When enough people embrace deception, it spreads through entire societies. What was once condemned becomes normal. What was once normal becomes offensive. Truth itself is redefined, not by its nature, but by the preferences of those who control the narrative. The question is no longer what is true, but what is accepted. And in such a world, truth is no longer discovered, it is manufactured. The mind under the influence of deception resists the very thing that could set it free. When confronted with truth, it reacts with hostility rather than consideration. Instead of weighing evidence, it dismisses it outright. Instead of seeking understanding, it seeks validation for what it already believes. Instead of questioning falsehoods, it questions the motives of those who speak against them. This is the most tragic aspect of perception's war. Those who are most blind believe they see most clearly. They mock those who warn them, ridicule those who try to help, and reject those who attempt to shine light into their darkness. They do not realize that the chains they wear are self-imposed, that the walls they build around their minds keep them imprisoned, not protected. The deeper one falls into deception, the harder it becomes to escape. Perception shapes desire, and desire shapes will. A man who no longer desires truth will not seek it, and a man who no longer recognizes goodness will not pursue it. He will believe himself to be free, even as he moves deeper into bondage, convinced that he is enlightened, even as he stumbles further into the dark. A soul under the influence of darkness does not remain unchanged. Corruption is not a static condition. It is a process, a slow unraveling of what was once whole. The mind, the heart, and the will begin to fragment, torn between what they once knew to be true and what they now cling to in deception. This disintegration is not always visible at first, but its signs emerge over time. A person who has given themselves over to darkness, whether knowingly or unknowingly, will begin to exhibit certain unmistakable characteristics. One of the first and most obvious signs is an increasing restlessness. A person in the grip of corruption cannot find peace, no matter how much they indulge in pleasure, power, or distraction. They seek fulfillment in the things that once satisfied them, but now these things feel empty, and so they chase after more validation, more excess, more indulgence. Yet the more they consume, the hungrier they become. The momentary pleasure fades faster each time, leaving behind an even deeper void. With this restlessness comes a growing intolerance for silence and reflection. A corrupted soul cannot sit in stillness, for stillness allows the conscience to speak. Instead, they surround themselves with noise, distraction, and constant motion. They seek to drown out the quiet voice that urges them to turn back. They fill their minds with entertainment, their schedules with busyness, their lives with endless pursuit, all in an attempt to escape the weight of their own thoughts. Another unmistakable sign is an increasing lack of empathy. The further a person falls into corruption, the less they are able to truly connect with others. They become detached from genuine human warmth, replacing it with manipulation, dominance, or indifference. Relationships, which were once built on love and trust, become transactional. People become means to an end rather than souls to be cherished. They may continue to speak of compassion and justice, but their actions betray a hollowness behind these words. They can no longer feel deeply for others because their own soul is growing numb. Alongside this loss of empathy comes a deepening cynicism. The corrupted mind no longer sees beauty for what it is. Love is viewed with suspicion, kindness with doubt, and sacrifice with ridicule. They assume that behind every good act is a hidden agenda, that no one acts selflessly, that everything is driven by power or self-interest. This cynicism is not wisdom. It is the decayed remnant of a soul that has forgotten how to recognize sincerity. A more dangerous sign of internal disintegration is an increasing comfort with falsehood. At first, a person may lie out of necessity to cover a mistake or gain an advantage. But over time, lying becomes second nature. It is no longer just about deceiving others, it becomes about deceiving oneself. They weave intricate narratives to justify their choices, convincing themselves that their actions are not only acceptable, but even noble. Their world becomes a web of illusions, where reality is no longer something to be discovered, but something to be shaped according to their desires. With deception comes contradiction. A corrupted person will often hold beliefs that are incompatible, yet they will defend them fiercely. They may claim to stand for truth while spreading falsehood, to desire peace while sowing conflict, to seek justice while acting unjustly. These contradictions are not mere lapses in logic. They are the inevitable result of a soul that has abandoned truth as its foundation. Another key sign of disintegration is an increasing hostility toward correction. A person who is still open to truth, even in their errors, will accept rebuke with humility. But the one who is giving themselves over to darkness reacts with defensiveness, anger, or mockery when confronted. They view correction not as an opportunity to grow, but as an attack on their very identity. The deeper their corruption, the more violently they lash out against those who challenge them. This hostility extends even to their own conscience. When a person is on the path to destruction, their conscience does not remain silent. At first, it speaks gently, offering quiet warnings. If ignored, it speaks louder, urging them to turn back. But when a person consistently rejects these warnings, the conscience itself begins to wither. What once would have stirred guilt or shame is now met with indifference. What once would have been unthinkable is now embraced without hesitation. Perhaps the most haunting sign of internal disintegration is an increasing sense of emptiness. The deeper a person sinks into darkness, the more hollow they become. They may surround themselves with success, pleasure, or influence, yet none of it satisfies. They may convince themselves that they are thriving, yet they cannot escape the gnawing feeling that something is missing. They may try to fill this void with ever greater indulgence, but no matter how much they take, it is never enough. The ultimate tragedy of internal disintegration is that it is often invisible to the one experiencing it. They may see the effects: broken relationships, unfulfilled desires, restless nights, but they do not connect these symptoms to their true cause. They believe their dissatisfaction can be cured by external means, when in reality, the sickness lies within. The more they seek fulfillment in the wrong places, the further they stray from what would truly heal them. The descent into darkness is not inevitable. Though corruption seeks to erode the soul, the will is never entirely without power. No force of evil, no matter how insidious, can completely strip away a person's ability to resist. Even in the deepest pit, a spark reminds a chance, however faint, to turn back. But resistance does not come easily. It requires effort, awareness, and above all, the willingness to confront what one has become. The first step in resistance is recognition. A person cannot fight against an enemy they refuse to acknowledge. Darkness thrives in secrecy and denial. It whispers that all is well, that no change is necessary, that the warnings of others are exaggerated or foolish. It convinces the corrupted soul that they are in control, that they are acting out of strength rather than weakness. This illusion must be shattered. Until a person sees the chains that bind them, they will not seek to break free. Recognition is painful. It requires the individual to look into the mirror and see not the version of themselves they have carefully constructed, but the truth, the compromises made, the falsehoods embraced, the harm inflicted. It means admitting that the voice of conscience, long ignored, was right all along. It means acknowledging that what was once seen as strength may have been pride, that what was defended as wisdom may have been deception. This moment of realization is often accompanied by grief, anger, or despair, but it is the necessary beginning of restoration. Once a person recognizes their state, they must decide whether they will change. It is one thing to see the path of destruction, and quite another to leave it. The difficulty lies not only in resisting external temptation, but in overcoming internal resistance. The corrupted mind has grown comfortable in its darkness. It has learned to justify its choices, to embrace its desires without question. To change is to unsettle this false peace, to step into discomfort, to admit error. Pride will resist, whispering that it is better to remain as one is than to endure the humiliation of admitting fault. True resistance does not rely on willpower alone. A person who tries to fight against their corruption by sheer determination will often fail, for the battle is not only against external temptation, but against the desires of the heart itself. To turn away from darkness, one must develop new, desires for truth, for goodness, for something greater than the self. This cannot be done passively. It requires deliberate effort. It means surrounding oneself with truth rather than deception, with wisdom rather than folly, with those who will challenge rather than enable. One of the greatest weapons against corruption is humility. The soul that seeks restoration must be willing to be corrected, to listen to those who see clearly, to submit to wisdom rather than personal preference. This is no easy task. The corrupted mind resists correction, perceiving it as an attack rather than a gift. But humility allows a person to receive truth without defensiveness, to acknowledge their flaws without despair. It opens the door to healing where pride would keep it shut. Another essential element of resistance is vigilance. The battle against darkness is not fought once and for all, but daily, moment by moment. It is not enough to reject corruption once one must continually guard against its return. The habits of deception, indulgence, and self-justification do not disappear overnight. They linger, waiting for a moment of weakness, ready to reclaim lost ground. The soul that seeks restoration must remain watchful, knowing that even a single compromise can reopen the door to destruction. Restoration requires patience. The process of corruption is slow, and so is the process of renewal. The mind that has been distorted must be retrained, The heart that has been hardened must be softened. The will that has been weakened must be strengthened. This does not happen instantly. It is a gradual, often painful journey, requiring perseverance even when progress seems invisible. It means enduring setbacks without giving up, recognizing that failure is not the end, but a lesson. True restoration is not merely about avoiding corruption, but about pursuing what is good. It is not enough to resist temptation. One must actively seek wisdom, truth, and virtue. The soul that seeks to be free must not only reject falsehood, but love truth, not only resist indulgence, but cultivate discipline, not only avoid harm, but do good. This shift in focus is essential. If a person merely fights against evil without pursuing good, they will remain empty, and emptiness is easily refilled by the very corruption they sought to escape. Perhaps the most difficult part of restoration is the willingness to make amends. Corruption does not exist in isolation. It leaves a wake of harm behind it. Words spoken in deception, relationships fractured by selfishness, wounds inflicted by arrogance, these remain even after a person turns away from darkness. True resistance does not ignore this damage, but seeks to repair it. This requires humility, courage, and the willingness to face those who have been hurt. It means not only seeking forgiveness, but demonstrating through action that change is real. There is a cost to resistance. The person who seeks to restore themselves will often face opposition, not only from within, but from without. Those who have embraced corruption will mock the effort to change, seeing it as weakness or foolishness. Old habits will call out, seeking to reclaim their hold. The battle will be exhausting, and at times it may feel easier to surrender. But the soul that persists will find something that corruption could never offer: peace. Not the false peace of self-deception, but the deep, abiding peace that comes from knowing that one has chosen what is true, what is right, what is good.